Greetings, I'm Zachary Hepner. Pleased to share this Dvar Torah with you for Parashat Shlach. Parashat Shlach presents us with two seemingly separate narratives. The sin of the meraglim, the spies who scouted the land of Canaan, and shortly afterwards, the episode of the mekoshesh etzim, the man who publicly desecrated Shabbat by gathering wood. These unrelated stories are in fact related. While one involves national-level espionage and a failure of faith, the other involves a lone wolf, Shabbat violator, desecrating the sanctity of Shabbat. A deeper look reveals a psychological and ethical thread running between them. Both episodes can be viewed through the lens of game theory, specifically the prisoner's dilemma. Both reveal profound truths about human nature, communal responsibility, moral risk, and a unique theology of Judaism. To start, the 12 spies are sent out to scout the land. They see all the same facts: a rich land flowing with milk and honey, but also giants and fortified cities. 10 of them return and warn the people, "We cannot conquer it." Only dissenters is Yehoshua and Calev, urging the people to trust in Hashem. Here's the dilemma. If all the 12 spies had trusted Hashem and spoken confidently, the nation would have moved forward likely, and the conquest would have followed with divine assistance. But each spy was at risk against colonization. They were against it. The pshat is that they were afraid of the giants. Or in today's language, they were facing a more advanced civilization with better technology, better intelligence, and simply better odds at a combat situation. Facing the high risk of death, they needed a unified message, not just a fact-finding mission. Chazal were so acutely aware of their bias that Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah cites that Calev was acutely aware, and Bamidbar Rabbah 16, quote, "They came to Nachal Eshkol. They cut from the vine with one cluster of grapes and bore it on a pole with two, and from the pomegranates and from the fig." That's Numbers 13:23. They came to the Eshkol River. They did not wish to take from the fruits of the land of Israel, had it not been for Calev, who drew the sword, ran before them and said to them, "If you do not take, either you will kill me, or I will kill you." They would not have taken. Therefore, Moshe took an oath on the day, saying, "The land on which your foot trod will be an inheritance for you," talking to Calev. Had he died on this uneventful mission, nobody would have suspected any perfidy, but Calev knew well that had he died on an eventful mission like this one, the reliability of the message of the scouts would be called into question, so they would have a better chance to keep him alive, and hopefully keep him quiet or just cancel him if he spoke up. The Midrash is also observing that this never was a fact-finding mission, because they did not even want to bring back the large Holy Land fruit, because it could bias the popular vote to go into war. Because it seemed risky, the payout is very high. The Israelites would see a high payout with the fruit, even at the risk, in the event of success. Like large fruit, or just replace the word fruit with dividends or prosperity. When the risk of war and death is likely, they would only succeed with a strong message against Calev and Yehoshua, or as a unified voice. Otherwise, the foolish Moshe would lead them into the undesirable outcome of war against these giants. This is a classical prisoner's dilemma logic. If everyone cooperates, the outcome is optimal, and failure in war is minimized. But an individual defection could result in collective failure. Ironically, their attempt to save themselves led to their worst desires being fulfilled. And they did not die in battle, but in a divine plague. And those who drank their Kool-Aid got mandated 40 years of wandering in the desert and death outside the Holy Land. But Yehoshua and Calev, through courage and conviction, they broke the logic of mutual distrust. They were the ones willing to defect from the defectors, reintroducing the possibility of trusting in Hashem. Their resistance changed the outcome. In fact, and here's the theological element, they said that the battle is actually one-sided because whoever's sides God is on is the only side that can and will succeed. Parenthetically, it's not random that Chazal in Masechet Sota say that Joshua needed divine intervention to dissent, and so did Calev. As it says, Amarava milech piresh Calev mi'atzat meraglim, that Calev had to separate himself from the conspiracy of the scouts. V'halach v'nishtatech al kivrei avot, and he went to Hebron and he prostrated himself at the Maratach Machpelah in front of the burial of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Caleb separated from the council of the other spies and went to prostrate himself at the graves of the forefathers in Hebron. He says, "My forefathers, pray mercy for me so that I'll be saved from the council of the spies." So Yehoshua also got Rachamim because Hashem added Yud and Hey, Yacha Yoshia Me'atzat Meraglim. Why did Calev go to the Marat HaMachpelah? Because there's no better role model of Rabim Biad Me'atim when the natural order should favor the many and the mighty. But the forefathers had already disproven that notion. Their success was based on the phrase we recite every Shabbat, every day before the Shema. Ba'avur avotenu Shabbat chuvecha, on account of our forefathers who had bitachon and trust in you. Their reliance on the one and only is the only reason why they are called forefathers. They are the teachers of the notion that God is the only mover, not giants, nor technology, nor might. Now to the mekoshesh etzim, which was a Sabbath gamble, because fast forward, immediately follow the laws of the bishogeg, the unintentional sinning. We read about the man who publicly violated Shabbat by gathering wood. This man wasn't just absent-minded, he saw an opportunity and was the dissenter in the prisoner's dilemma. The dissenter that succeeds, that is. Everyone else is observing Shabbat, so no one else is collecting wood. There's no competition. The mekoshesh is thinking, if I collect now, I'll get more firewood, faster firewood, and free firewood. It's simply a calculated risk. But it's also a communal betrayal because wood is a limited resource and nobody else was collecting for wood on Shabbat. Just like the spies, he was also engaged in a game of strategy. He was gambling that his actions will benefit him while the rest of the community remain loyal to the brit of Shabbat. If everyone defected, if others also started gathering wood, then the competitive edge would disappear. Of course, so would the sanctity of Shabbat. But as long as most people cooperate, one defector can benefit disproportionately. Furthermore, he could not claim ignorance, as we learn the law of the ignorant sin offering a few verses earlier, in the same sense that one cannot claim ignorance about which side of the street to drive on. Just observe that every driver is on one side going one way, so you ought to follow them too. Similarly, nobody else is gathering wood. Even an ignorant observer would realize that there must be some cultural taboo against violating the local observance. This too is the prisoner's dilemma. Each person has a temptation to cheat, but if we all cheat, everyone loses. The mekoshesh acts not out of ignorance because the Torah just clarified the law of the accidental sins, making it clear that ignorance is not an excuse when everyone else is visibly doing the right thing. He knows the rules. He sees that other people are refraining. That's precisely why he was collecting the wood. He was doing what's called a strategic rebellion. However, unlike the spies, where there was no Calev, there was no Yehoshua to counter his actions, Rashi cites Sifrei Bamidbar 114 and Sanhedrin 78, that not only was he aware of his actions, but he was warned and forewarned. His lone defection stands, and the result is clear: capital punishment. The juxtaposition of these two stories, the meraglim and the mekoshesh etzim, teach a powerful lesson. Both faith and Shabbat observance rely on trust. The spies had to rely on trust that Hashem would, will, and does deliver. The mekoshesh had to trust that refraining from work on Shabbat, in fact, is the source of blessing, not the source of scarcity. In other cases, the individual acts based on the assumption that others will cooperate, and that he alone can cheat the system. This is the fatal flaw of the prisoner's dilemma when it's played out in a moral and spiritual realms, as in entering Eretz Yisrael and Shabbat observance. However, there's a redemptive element. Yehoshua and Calev's courageous cooperation against the cancel culture, even when it's unpopular, can keep people from a moral collapse. Their fundamental message, technology and might, do not win battles. The kol yachol, to the exclusion of everything else, wins battles. Perhaps the story of the mekoshesh is recorded not just as a warning, but as a mirror to show us what happens when no one speaks up, when defection goes unchecked. It further reminds us of what happens when one uses religion as a personal spade for personal advancement. This parasha touches upon entering the Holy Land and the sanctity of Shabbat, not themes of personal advancement. The Holy Land is where we best connect to the Almighty. Shabbat is when we best connect to the Almighty, and the Torah is our tree of life, connecting us to the Almighty. This Dvar Torah is written as our brethren in the Holy Land are fighting a war against the existential enemy, wishing and trying to get the existential technology. May we merit to see the outstretched arm of the Almighty who is fighting our war and sing his praise. Uva L'Tzion Goel. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.